Welcome to Neurodivergency, where neurodivergent voices and friends turn struggle into strength. We're here to break the stigma around mental health, dive into truth about our brains, and bring you real tools for clarity, healing, and hope. Today's guest is Mordy Gottlieb, who is a human being on a journey called life. He just told me that minutes ago. Thank you for sharing that, Morty. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful, Anthony. I'm excited to be here and have this conversation and share what I know, but also learn from you. And you've produced a lot of stuff that I benefited from. Just one of when I have tasks to do, start with the most uncomfortable one or the lowest exciting one first, and then working my way up. And that's been really life-changing for me.
Has it? Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, I'm really glad when I can share some nuggets. So, for context, Morty and I have had a chat before recording the episode. And so I'd love for you to share a little bit about your background and your relationship to neurodivergence.
When I was growing up back in the early 90s, this wasn't really a topic of conversation. Nobody really knew what was going on. And for most of the time, I was just blamed, for not paying attention enough, not wanting it enough, not caring enough. And what nobody knew was I wanted it desperately. I just wanted to be like everyone else. I just wanted to pay attention, be able to focus. Things would have been a lot easier. I would have gotten into a lot less trouble. The unfortunate reality was nobody was aware of that at that time. So, I grew up in a life of where instead of recognizing that maybe my brain functioned a little bit differently, I blamed myself. And that's a very tough way to live because then it almost feels like it's hopeless. Like if the problem is me, but I don't know what the problem is, then I'm sort of stuck. So the common theme for me throughout my life is never really feeling understood. Like people would say they understood or say they got me, but they just really never knew what was going on with me. And the more frustrating was I, for a long time, didn't know what was going on with me. And that's really challenging.
That is the worst to not know what's going on for ourselves. Yeah, so I'm hearing based on that a lot of symptoms about ADHD. Is that correct?
Yeah. So a lot of ADHD, a lot of inability to focus, a lot of impulsivity, and also a lot of what looked like probably mood disorder or bipolar at a really young age. And what I've come to really understand, and of course, everyone is so different, and there's beauty in that. There's also a challenge in that because you got to figure out what's what for you. Was that, you know, really a lot of my hurt and my wounding and my trauma really impacted me in a way that I didn't know how to be okay with myself. I wasn't okay sitting with myself. I wasn't stable because I would get activated and all of a sudden I would go from a thriving child to a top to I remember just rolling around on the floor having temper tantrums. What's going on with me that I'm having temper tantrums at such a young age? And what nobody knew was that I was being hurt in ways that were really dark and deep, and that really contributed a lot to the way that I operated.
Yeah, wow. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and I agree, and I want to emphasize the point that it's so complex to kind of diagnose and label and really figure out what is the truth behind the reasons why we do the things that we do. I'm curious to know what was life like when you were struggling more than today? Can you kind of paint us a picture of either a specific moment or story or maybe a particular phase in life to really give yeah, that context?
Sure. Life was miserable. I mean, life was awful. Life was terrible. If I probably knew that suicide was an option at a young age, I might have contemplated doing it. I probably just didn't realize that's a thing that could be done. To me, this deepest desire to want to do something, this deepest desire. I remember in specifically one of the ways that I started coping at a young age was with food. And, it's one of my earliest coping mechanisms. And because that was so powerful for me, and it was really the only thing in the entire world that said, Morty, I'm here for you. You don't have to explain, you don't have to answer. There's nothing to do. I am here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'm just here and I'm always available. When I would come home from school, the amount of irritability I felt in my body, the amount of unsafety, I would say, the amount of not being seen. If I came home and supper wasn't ready, I'm a 5, 6, 7 year old kid. It's really not that big of a deal. To me, I literally would yell and scream. That's how disconnected I was from myself. That's how irritable I was. So imagine a young child comes home and the supper's not ready and they're having a temper tantrum on the floor. And it was really challenging for my parents to know, like, what's going on. It didn't make sense to them. They're quote unquote normies. They're just, all right, we're doing life. Things are going to be challenging. And they didn't understand the depths of my pain. And to me, that really painted the picture of my life of being the black sheep, the misunderstood person. Like, what's going on with Morty? Like, why can't he just do things? Why does he always get excited about projects and then stop? Why does he get motivated sometimes and other times he's stuck? Like, and it's such a painful existence because I wanted so desperately to do these things, but I really didn't know how. So my childhood was miserable.
Yeah, that sounds really tough. Thank you so much for sharing and expressing that. And I really resonate a lot with what you share. A lot of it reflects in my own personal story, using food as a coping mechanism. I didn't even realize that until I had shed alcohol and smoking and partying and
Sure.
other things. Um, then it's like the last layer. You can't just quit food forever. It's impossible. But yeah. Do you have any brothers or sisters? Just curiosity.
I am the oldest of six. So I have one brother, me, my brother. My mother said she never thought that she would have any daughters because she had two boys. And then I don't know, because she thought that, or who knows, then she had four daughters. So I'm
Wow.
the oldest of six. Yeah.
Okay, wow, that must have been a busy household in your growing up.
And I was very busy. And because of my wounding, what I really was seeking was attention. I really
Mm,
wanted to be cared for. And I believe one of the byproducts or ways that I got that was acting like a nut, like acting like a crazy person got me the attention that I was craving.
interesting. Interesting. I'd love to kind of skip forward through the journey and we'll dive back into your journey right after, but I'd love to know what does life look like for you right now, especially with regards to mental and emotional health.
Yeah, so it's been a long journey. And, eventually I got diagnosed with bipolar, ADHD, anxiety, and I was put on a slew of medications. And as I reflect back, it's so challenging because it was like I was waiting for this my whole life. Like finally somebody saw me and acknowledged me, and that wasn't my solution. So it's as I reflect back of this journey of like I was waiting to be diagnosed, then I got diagnosed, but I still didn't get well. Oh my goodness. Wow. So that wasn't the issue. Okay. So to me, being diagnosed in my early 20s, just to really catch you up to today, because I think this is an important part of the story, I was put on some very heavy medications, and I didn't even realize when I was on it the impact that it had on me. Years later, when I went off the medication, my roommate said to me during the time that I was on it, he said, I was never going to tell you this. And now that you're off the medication, I'll tell you, you were walking around in a coma. That's the way I experienced you. You were so disconnected from yourself. You didn't even realize it. And I'm like, wow, I didn't realize it. I thought things were at least okay enough. So for me today, what I realized, this is my journey and my story, was that my trauma, my hurt, really drove a lot of my diagnoses of mental illness. Meaning the reason why I don't have capacity to have attention was because I never learned how to be okay in being my body. The reason why I had bipolar was because what I call them emotional flashbacks, which means I'm a functional adult. I get triggered. My partner says something. My boss says, I need to speak to you in my office. And all of a sudden, I'm like, well, what happened? Did I lose my job or something? Like that catastrophizing, which looks like, oh, all of a sudden he went from being okay to, having a really intense experiences. So really healing and doing the underlying work of healing that trauma has really transformed my life today, where the journey to get off the medication, that's the other piece. When you're on things for a long time, it's slow. Like I thought I would be off already everything 2 years ago. And my body, is like, no, we need to take it slowly. So it's really been a journey. But what I found on the other side, most importantly, was freedom, was the ability to learn how to have feelings, have emotions, to accept that I'm not the most focused and organized person. And two things. One is I need to be okay with that and laugh at myself when, like, oh, all right, that's just my brain. That's just me. That's just, and, and two, do put in small things that really support me. Like I put my keys in the same place every time just because that works for me. So it's a lot of acceptance and also a lot of really small practical tools, very small, nothing extreme, that really support my well-being. Because to me, what I've noticed is as much as I heal, I'm never going to be quote unquote perfect. I was wounded. There's only so much you can put it back together. There's going to be parts that are always going to be a little bit less than ideal, and I've learned to laugh with it and accept it.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing about that journey. So, yeah, it sounds like you've done some really deep work, introspective, beyond getting diagnosed and put on medication. Also, learning more, doing that inner work, and being able to kind of compensate for whatever the medication was bringing in order to slowly transition off of them. And that's amazing. I'd love to know more about what that journey was like. Um, yeah, what were some of the major milestones, knowledge, tools, life experiences that you would want to get into in this conversation?
And it's so challenging when I reflect back on my journey of how much pain I had to be in until I was willing to change. It's so, I don't know the answer to that. I sit with clients and I remind them of like, we're here today. You're 25 years old. I have bad news for you. If we don't change now, you will be here at 45 and then at 65. They say, how do you know? I said, I've seen it hundreds of times. People come into treatment or recovery at 50 and 60, and they look at the young guy, they're like, you better get this now. If you don't get this now, you're going to be 50 and be cheating on your wife and drinking alcohol. Like, that's your future. Like, things unfortunately don't get better, they only get worse. And I'm grateful that I hit my bottom in my early 20s and I had an opportunity to really change my life. And what I'm reminded though is, and this I remind my clients, I remind myself, is there's not just one way to heal. Just because now the in style is to do this type of therapy or this modality, and you tried it, doesn't mean you're hopeless. There's probably 85, and that's probably 185 different types of techniques you could try before you need to start thinking about being hopeless. So until you do 185 things, there's still things to try out there. For me, what recovery really looked like, because what I really needed, my core wounding was feeling abandoned. And again, what's so important is whether it was real or imagined, it made no difference. That was my reality so much that's
Yeah.
the way my system responded to life. So it's not about, because people say, "Oh, what do you mean? You had a good childhood." Like, look, maybe it was good. I have no idea. This was my experience. And for me, I found the most healing. And what I find is most people find the most healing in this, but they're most afraid to do it. I found my healing in groups with other people. When I was able
Mm.
to walk into a room and say, "Hey, I'm Mordy. This is what I've done in my life. This is the ways I fucked up." And people said, "Oh, I know that. Oh, I've done that. Oh, that's okay. That's all." It was like a place of for the first time in my life where number one is people understood me. They understood these, like, oh yeah, I do that. I'm like, oh, I didn't, I till I walked into that room, I had no idea that other people were struggling with the same thing I was struggling with. And that's the unfortunate reality is so many of us are struggling. Not so many of us, all of us are dealing with something, yet we all
Yeah.
make believe I'm doing okay. You know that, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much of that programming we get from society to appear a certain way, or not appear a certain way, like weak or whatever it may be. And it's just so it disconnects us from our authenticity. Just to provide some context for the listener, what is the kind of work that you do?
What do I do? So originally in my career, my goal was to be a pastry chef, and I went to school, and then my life fell apart. Thank now I could say today, actually, thankfully. And when I had my experience, I went to treatment. That's really what it was, and I was there for 13 months. And that's the other piece. Now, people want healing in a minute and in a week. Sometimes healing, if you got hurt in a minute, then maybe your healing could be a minute. But if you hurt over 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, it might take some time. And today, my passion is twofold: sitting with people one on one and really holding them in their pain, really making space for them to be okay with who they are. And I love groups. I love community. There's so much safety in that when you know how to build it. So I do corporate work and go into businesses who are maybe struggling. People don't see eye to eye. They really don't know each other. And really what I'm doing is, in a nutshell, they don't even know it, is I'm showing them we're really all the same. We're just one human. We're all humans going through life. We look different on the outside and on the inside. It's the same fears and same aspirations.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, thank you for sharing that context. I'd love to know more about that 13-month healing experience. Yeah, can you tell us more about what it was? And
Sure. So when my life fell apart, I needed a higher level of care. And so many people now are resistant to it because what are people going to say? What are people going to do? And thankfully, it's become more commonplace. We hear athletes and celebrities going to treatment. So it's become more, and really it was an opportunity for me to say, my life is not working. Years later, my mother told me, she's like, Morty, I didn't think you would make it to your 30s. And like didn't even know how much I was struggling. And that's one of the other pieces. When you're in it, you're like, this is the way life is, I guess, and this is the best it's going to be. And I said to myself, I'm willing to put my life on hold because my life is in a certain way, no, I'm not getting the most out of life. And if I'm going to try to continue struggling, maybe I'll make it past 30, maybe I won't. And maybe I'll experience what a lot of people experience, which is really painful. And I call it living death, which is I'm alive, but I have a life that feels like death, or I wish I wasn't alive. And to me, there's so much pain in that. And I so relate to that. So I said to myself, I'm going to stop my life and get well at all costs. I didn't know what that meant on that day when I decided. It was back in 2014 in April, but I said, I'm in this for the long haul. And I went to a treatment program, and people know usually it's a month, 2 months. And then they called me into the office after 2 months and they said, Morty, some people are sicker than others, and you're the sicker than others. I said, okay, what does that mean? They said, you need more extended care. So I was living in New York. I went to treatment in Tennessee, and they said, you're going to be going to Arizona. And there was a relief, there was a freedom of like, wow, somebody finally recognizes that I'm not okay and that I cannot do it on my own. That was the biggest sense of relief. And finally, somebody said, Morty, you're doing the best you could. You're fucked. You will not be able to do it. You don't have the tools, you don't have the capacity. Let somebody else support you. And when I went to Arizona, I was there for, I was in Arizona actually for 11 months. So it was a total of 13 months. And what I got to witness there was, for me, part of my issue also was I didn't know how to be an adult. I was like, didn't know what consequences were. My parents, one of their biggest regrets was I was supposed to get summer school in eighth grade for not doing a good job at school, and they got me out of it. And what they taught me was there's no consequences. So I lived a life where I did whatever I wanted and had other people bail me out. So it was the first time I went to a treatment facility. And not only that, we did groups and we did types of therapy to deal with my mental health. They told me what it means to be a human being. What does it mean to get up every day at the same time, to make your meals, to make your bed, to do your laundry, to cook for yourself? If you don't do what you need to do, there's going to be consequences. I mean, I was angry. I was really angry. I didn't like it at the beginning. And what that taught me was, I'm like, I don't know how everybody else learned how to be a human being, but I really had no idea. I needed to be shown this is what life looks like in the real world. And what I learned most was that it's okay for me to feel uncomfortable. And just because I feel discomfort in my body does not mean I need to avoid, because that was what I did my whole life. I felt uncomfortable. Let me avoid, let me numb, let me choose the more comfortable way. And what I learned was I don't have to be comfortable, and that most of my success has come from going right through the discomfort. The harder it is, the more reward I've seen on the other side. And that was one of the biggest lessons and gifts they gave me.
Wow, that's incredible. Um, yeah, I'm relieved to hear that programs like that exist. And I hope that because of conversations like these, we can really spread the word and encourage people that, if you're feeling stuck, if you're frustrated, if you have some problems, but you don't know where they're coming from, why they're happening, starting to talk about it, to investigate and really getting that help that you need is, yeah, really can be the difference between a life that of freedom, a life that feels good, and a life where you don't feel like living it, as you said, living dead.
Exactly.
So I'm curious to know, how did you go from the pastry chef ambition to now holding space, consulting, and that kind of deep inner emotional work?
So when I was sitting in treatment, for these 13 months, and I'm reflecting on, for the first time, probably pausing long enough to see what do I want for my life? And this is such an important question. Not what my parents want, not what my community needs me to be. What does Morty need? What does he want? And it's such a scary question to ask because so many people have opinions, and these tapes have been playing in my head, by that time for 20 years. They're just, you're going to do this, you're going to be that. And I remember having a conversation with one of my therapists at that time, and I said to him, I'm going to be going back to what I was doing before. Like, I was a full-time student doing religious studies. That's what I'm doing. And for most of my life, people were afraid of me. Nobody wanted to tell me the truth because on the other side of that, I might yell at them, I might scream at them. I was totally unpredictable. And the beautiful thing about this program was nobody was afraid of me. Nobody was afraid of my anger. Nobody, look, I wasn't allowed to shame somebody or embarrass them. But if I'm angry, they had space for that. And he turns to me and he says to me in the most kind, gentle voice, he said to me, Morty, if nothing changes, nothing changes. You could go back there, same community, same friends, same people. That's one option. It's going to be very hard for you not to stay the same. And I'm like, oh my, I used to like, that wasn't this. I sort of came to treatment to get well. I just wanted to take out this part of me, but everything else should be the same. And what I learned on that day was what was happening to me, and I just didn't realize it, is that really only one thing changed with me. And the one thing that changed with me was everything. And everything had to change, right? So it was one thing. They only changed one thing, and it was everything. And I realized that I also had to change everything. And part of my willingness to change and my commitment to myself was if what I was doing wasn't working, I had to find a new way of living. Not because not because like I didn't want to. And there was like a lot of grief in it. Like I expected to go to treatment and then I'm going back to my old way of living. And it was that moment I realized that my old way of living is just my old way of living. When I reflected on what do I want to come from my life? What do I want it to be? What do I want my legacy to be? Right? I'm here, whether I'll be reincarnated, who the hell knows? But I won't even know if I am. So I'll have to make the best of my time here. What do I want? What do I want my gift to the world to be? And because I was so wounded and so hurt, and I wish that somebody like me would have been there for me years ago, would have seen me in my pain, would have said, Morty, despite everything you've done, and I've worked with people that have done very horrible actions that most people in society have no space for. They probably want them killed. And I can respect it. It's a very sensitive topic. But when they come in and I help them realize your actions don't define you. What you did doesn't define you. You were so broken and so wounded. I have compassion for you. I don't like the actions that you did. I hate that you did that, but I really care about you. And when I realized that that's what I needed to heal, and that's the things that people gave me, I'm like, let that be my legacy. Me sitting with people day in, day out, and really helping them live life. So that was my process of deciding that I want to become a therapist. That just was the easiest or most defined path at that time. Go to school, become a therapist, and actually had a mir- I had a, actually had a miracle. I was in treatment. So I decided on becoming a therapist. Now, normally to become a therapist, at least in the United States, you got to get your bachelor's, then you got to get your master's. I mean, we're looking at like 3 to 5 years minimum. Like just to get my bachelor's, if I
Yeah.
do it full time.
Hmm.
So what am I going to do? 6 years till I get my degree? And I'm sitting in treatment one day, and somebody who was in the same school as me back in the East Coast comes to treatment. And I tell him, this is my idea. I want to become a therapist, but I don't want to spend 6 years doing this degree. He said to me, you apparently weren't aware that our school got accredited and you actually have a bachelor's degree. I said, nah, you're joking. That can't be. What do you mean? He said, I'm telling you. So I called my dad. I couldn't call the school. We had very limited phone access. And I called my dad. I said to him, could you call my old school and see if it's true that I have a bachelor's? 3 weeks later, I had my bachelor's. So it was truly a miracle. So when I left treatment, I
It
was able to
is.
go right to school. And instead of having to spend, the 4 years of my bachelor's, I was able just to go right to my master's program. So that also made the decision a lot easier.
Makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, wow. Wow. So yeah, since then, skilled in therapy, having gone through your own personal journey makes it even that much more meaningful and that much more relevant as well for anyone that comes your way. I mean, just to be able to hear what you say about compassion for some of the worst acts in the world, that's a huge, huge transformation, compared to the wounded child from before getting put on all these labels and pills and everything.
Yes.
I'd love to know what else was there apart from that 13-month experience that contributed to shaping the version of you that exists today.
So, like I said, there's when I committed to get well, and I had a true gift. I don't I was It was a gift that was given to me. One of the challenges I find with a lot of my people is that single people have a hard time getting well because they don't have that person that's going to hold them accountable. They don't feel like some days we don't want to do it for ourselves. So at least our partner could motivate us not to stay well, but at least to show up for therapy or show up for our commitments. And I was single throughout the entire time of my journey. And that made it extremely challenging. And I really want to give voice to that for the people that are single. You're unfortunately at a disadvantage in many ways. And in some ways, it's the biggest blessing because one of the challenges that married people have, I'm trying to regulate my nervous system, right? That's a job, full-time job. And they're right, regulating this guy because that's really what this is on the core. That's really what this is all about.
Yeah.
Imagine having to not only regulate your own nervous system, but you have a partner that gets dysregulated. You have children that get dysregulated. You have children that have needs. So all of a sudden, it goes from I have to take care of myself and get my own mental health back, yet I'm so distracted or so busy having to deal with everybody else. So while it's challenging in a way, there's also a freedom. And if you're single, take advantage of it because there's so much it's so much easier to do the work because all you have to do is focus on yourself. So to me, since treatment, and this is at the beginning I was resentful and I'm like, oh, treatment just didn't fix me, and then that was it. Like this is a journey, and to me, it's not about the destination. If the destination is the goal, I'm screwed. Number one, I don't really know what the destination is. Like when, like I'm gonna be happy when I don't know when I don't know when that would ever even be. So for me, how do I find joy on the journey? To me, it's a joyful journey of really discovering, trying things, doing some things that work, doing some things that don't work, doing things that are outlandish. For an example, I did something I never thought I would do, and when I reflect back on it and I tell people, it's one of the weirdest things that I ever did. So I tried something called combo. Do you know what combo is?
Yeah, it's a plant medicine, or not necessarily a plant, is it it's the toad um kind of peptide indigenous medicine. Yeah.
Right. So I'm on this journey. I don't know. I guess I felt like I wanted more. I needed more. And somebody
Yeah.
says to me, somebody who I trusted, so why don't you try this combo? I said, well, what is combo? He's like, well, it's really good to have a release. And I go do this ceremony where essentially they take an incense stick on fire, they burn holes on my arm. I'm like, what are we doing here? Like, they call them portals. They're not holes, they're portals. Okay.
Yeah.
And then they put this frog venom, frog peptide on it. And I start feeling the sickest I've ever felt in my life. Like, I don't know what death feels like, but imagine it's like on the brink of like, I'm so, it's like your worst flu and worst nausea ever experienced. And then you purge and then you feel better. And it was a good experience. I'm glad I did it. And what that showed me is I'm literally willing to do anything to get well. An important question I ask people, and I ask this to myself too, and people don't like the question because it puts them in a very challenging situation. I say to them, most people ask, what are you willing to do to get well? I say to them, what are you not willing to do to get well? They're like, well, what am I not willing to do to get well?
Wow.
And
It's a
it's a,
great
it's a
question.
tough question. Yeah.
That's a
And it
really great
challenges,
question.
yeah, you like it? You could use
Yeah.
it. Take
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. No, I love that. I love that. And yeah, I love that you mention indigenous wisdom traditions, kind of alternative solutions. I've always been an explorer myself, but this is not about me. One of the resources that I share with people a lot of the times is a book by Dr. Gabor Mate, and that book is called The Myth of Normal. And in that book, there's many layers to it. But one of the big themes is the illustration of how Western society that we've developed with capitalism, with stress, with being away from nature, with being individualistic, all of these elements are really quite the opposite of indigenous culture, where they're living in nature, they're living in tribe, they're connected, and all of these things. And so there's already so many layers of psychological, emotional, and spiritual stress from just being in the Western world. That's one thing. And the second thing is actually Gabor Mate, is he's a world-renowned doctor, therapist, etc. Has his own healing modality for anyone who doesn't know. Um, and he is an advocate of psychedelics. He writes in his book about ayahuasca and about people who have traveled to the jungle in order to go and take ayahuasca with some indigenous tribes and have miraculous solutions after having tried literally everything, all of the talk therapies, all of the whatever was typically available in the West. And we're talking about big diseases that they reversed, like autoimmune conditions or cancer and things like that. And that's just mind blowing. I mean, my point in sharing all of this is that A, there's so much out there. And you're absolutely right when you say if you haven't tried 185 things, there's no reason to feel hopeless because there's something out there. Yeah,
I'm so happy because I do want to talk more about this piece
please.
of because if what we were doing is working, then great. Like it's not a problem. If, like all the medications that we're giving, all the therapy that we're doing, if that alleviated our suffering, amazing. And it helps for a lot of people. And despite the fact we're still the most anxious, depressed, overweight nation in the country, at least in the US. So obviously, what we're doing is not enough. And I really appreciate you talking about the community aspect because to me, that's where so much of the healing is. Meaning, I could do grief work with a therapist. Okay, powerful. But then I went to retreats where we did grief work in community. What's it like to have 200 people doing grief work and crying and yelling and supporting each other? The power of that is, I don't know the times, but it's the 200. It's just, it's infinite.
Yeah. Yeah, orders of magnitudes greater, just because we have so many other beings and such a, whether we call it an energy field that we create together or whether we call it co-regulation because of mirror neurons and love or whatever, that there's always, science is just catching up to find the explanations, but the reality is the experience can be had. And you don't need to have all the scientific understanding. And I think it's the same thing with Cambo. There's also a psychological benefit, I think, from being able to go, well, you know what? I did this new thing. It was painful, but I maybe had some doubts and maybe had some fears from doing it. And of course, those doubts and fears are helpful. I'm not here to say that one should not have any doubts and fears and do everything just because. Of course, we want to preserve our safety. I have to say that. But there is an
Of course,
element of doing that new thing that is healing in itself, to be able to say, yeah, I'm a new version of me now that I've done that.
100%. And that is they're similar to cold water exposure. Besides for the benefits that it actually gives you, the discipline of doing something that's extremely uncomfortable and doing it anyways, that's really what life's about. How do I learn? Because when I get trauma or I have mental illness, I'm so seeking comfort. And really, what we need to seek is discomfort, because that's a lot of where the seek this. There's some type of message. Who has that? Seek discomfort. Isn't that a thing?
There, yeah, there's definitely a meme or something that I saw comparing and contrasting. If you make the hard decisions and the hard work now, you'll have the easy life later. But if you make the easy decisions and easy work now, you'll have the hard life later. And it's this opposing thing of really building ourselves up to be the best version of ourselves the earlier as possible.
And I want to say one other point on psychedelics, which is we in my life, there's probably a lot more people that have done that than I even realize because there's so much stigma around it. Nobody wants to talk about it. So again, we have a community of people that are getting well by certain modalities, and then they're afraid to talk about it. In addition to, which has always happens, is everyone's going to say, "Oh, I read in the paper one time someone did ayahuasca and they went crazy." Right. And I'm sure it's happened. And of course, taking the precautions, speak to your
For sure.
doctors, take everything. But am I going to stop driving? Because someone shared with me this stat. I think the number one thing that kills men under 40 is car accidents. So are we going to stop driving now? No, of course. People have different
Yeah.
reactions. What are you going to do?
Yeah, it's a great point. Everything has its risks and benefits, and even down to nutrition, everything has its pros and cons. You can't really compare a salad with a McDonald's. I mean, you can in some ways, but in other ways you can't. And so it's always a question of the whole package, the whole experience together. Is my pain big enough that I want to try this risky solution? And there's other factors, of course, that influence, like how easy is it to access this solution, legality of course, we're not recommending that people do illegal things. But the truth is, psychedelics are legal in certain countries. Ayahuasca in South America is legal for indigenous tribes and just in general. In the Netherlands, psilocybin is legal. In other countries, I think it's Costa Rica, Jamaica, psilocybin is legal as well, and that's the ingredient in magic mushrooms. And beyond that, there's a whole world of research happening in the US, in the UK, other parts of Europe, Canada. Those worlds are opening up more and more, and there are clinical trials happening. And if you qualify for a research study, then you can have the experience without the pressures from the safety of legality and without the risks of having a bad substance. It's actually going to be the highest quality and in the most controlled of dosages in the safest way possible. So yeah, there's lots of solutions out there.
Right. And that's the main piece, guys. Listen to it. There's lots of solutions out there. That's the main takeaway. It's not the end of the journey for you.
Yeah, definitely. I love, thank you for, yeah, really shouting out to the listener there. Um I'd love to, yeah, unless you have any more on psychedelics or other alternative modalities that you have experience with or have heard about. I'd love to hear more.
Yeah. So what else have I done? Let's see. So I did combo. Another one that I really like, and again, this is not advocating for you to do it. Speak to your doctor. I don't have any, don't send your attorneys after me. This is just totally one man's experience. So you do you. And also, like you talked about, and this is a very important piece, is that I'm extremely mindful of where I get my stuff from. I'm not just going to go find some on the internet to do combo. I have no idea what they have in there. So it's very important to make sure that the people you go to are trusted and verified, because if not, and I imagine that could be what happens sometimes, that people get stuff that's laced with all sorts of.
For
But I
sure.
found extreme. Right? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's either when there are problems that we hear about in the news, I would be 90 to 95% sure that it would be unintentional, uh, like bad use of a substance or a bad substance or a multiple substance mix that is at play. But continue.
And and or you weren't honest with the provider about everything you're taking. Meaning maybe there's
Yeah,
interactions between medications. Be like, no, I don't need to tell them that I'm taking aspirin for, as a blood thinner. Well, okay, then what are you going to do? Then the person can't give you accurate information. So that's the other thing. It's
yeah,
important to be honest. Don't. So what else have I done, which I really like? So combo, I did a bunch of times. Very challenging, a very painful experience. Once I did it once, it was really much more challenging to do it again because I knew what to expect. One that I really enjoy. I don't do it regularly anymore. I don't feel like I need it, but I know that just knowing that I have this in my back pocket gives me a lot of calmness. Is hape. Some people hape, rape, who knows? People call it all sorts of things.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know that one?
And yeah, another indigenous plant medicine mix of tobacco and other plant ashes, right? That you then uh inhale kind of through your nose, like through a pipe. Yeah, it's an interesting consumption.
But the way that it's served, that's what they call this stuff. Served,
Yeah,
they take this, it's like a straw device, and they put tobacco in the end, and then they blow it up your nose.
yeah,
And what I find with that is so many times I'm blocked and I want to access deeper feelings. And that medicine is a real heart opener. It's really gentle. I'm not going into another world. I'm not tripping and seeing, different versions of myself. What I'm really opening up to is this version of myself, and it really helps me access grief and sadness and pain. So that's one that I do. And almost always when I do it with somebody else. because I want to have that part of doing it is them being supported in the medicine and having
Yeah.
somebody there to put their hand on my shoulder. And the other one that I've done is Stananga, which is an eye drop that feels, the only best way to describe it is it feels like they're putting, it's an eye drop and it feels like they're stabbing your eyes with glass and hot sauce. That's the best way to describe it. And in the
Yeah.
indigenous
Yeah.
cultures,
Wow.
they use it at night. It helps them see clear when they're going hunting. And I found for me that when I did it, and again, it could be just because when you go under extreme pain, you're going to feel better on the other side when you do something really hard. But afterwards, I felt a deep sense of relaxation, of openness. And this word might not mean anything unless you really understand it. Is that I was able to see more. I just felt like when I
Mm,
looked outside, the colors were more vivid. My perspective of the world really shifted to see its beauty and the kindness as opposed to seeing everything else that's there. So those are the medications, three
yeah.
indigenous medicines that I've engaged with.
Interesting. Yeah, really, really interesting. And yeah, what I've heard from Hape and Sananga is that they have so many uses. Actually, it's not just one kind of symptom, but it actually is very multiple use. I while we're on the topic of indigenous wisdom and alternative things, we've talked a lot about substances and physical material kind of elements so far. I'd love to get into the spiritual piece. Yeah, I wonder um yeah, I wonder to what extent has spirituality shaped you as a person or helped with your mental well-being?
So unfortunately, for me, spirituality was connected to religion. And that's true for a lot of the people that I work with. And what I've come to discover years later, here's the difference between spirituality and religion. Religion is for people that don't want to go to hell, and spirituality is for people that have already been there. So you
Interesting.
like
Yeah.
that one?
Interesting yeah, frame. Keep going. So clearly
Right.
you had been through hell already,
Yeah.
as far as I understand.
We did the hell journey. And the challenging piece is, and this is unfortunate, is that so much of my pain and a lot of people's pain comes from religion. So much of the shame or not enoughness or you have to do more or not feeling valued came from the fact that I was brought up religious. So been a lot of unwinding in that process of how could I be okay with myself and not be religious? And for a religious person, that's very hard to think about because what we were taught is there's no space for that. And for me, what the journey has really looked like in particular, now I believe in God. That's what I believe in a higher power. And my journey really had to be to accept that this God will love me and accept me, even if I don't do the religious practices.
Yeah.
Terrifying.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right that a lot of people are traumatized, psychologically wounded because of religion or religious expectations. And it's not, I'm not saying religion here just to put religion to shame. We can have spiritual cults also that are not religious, but can have the same effect. So yeah, it's as much as they can be beneficial, they can also hurt us. And I think it does have its place to make peace with our spiritual wounds in order to kind of achieve that freedom from, yeah, difficult emotions and symptoms and just making sense of who we are, why the world exists, and how what our purpose is and how do we operate in the world.
Right. And the way that I've done that for myself is I really, and this is sounds crazy, and this is what I did anyways. I did an exposure therapy with God. I said to God like this: I've been wounded by all these practices. I want to do them. I'm happy to, but they've been so hurtful for me. The only way for me to really know and believe that you accept me unconditionally and that it's not tied directly to my religious practices is to stop doing them. And if you, and just show me, I'm going to stop being religious and you show me, teach me, give me consequences, punish me, do something to me to show me that Morty, the path that you're on is the wrong path. So I stopped doing these religious practices and my life got better because there was so much shame attached to these practices. My whole identity was, did I do it? Did I not do it? And then even when I did it, most of the time, I didn't do it good enough. I could have done it better. I could have done it with more intent. So I really had to step aside from that and relearn for me, and this is not it's not possible for everyone because of their relationship they had with their father, but could I really realize that God for me is like my father? My father, he helps me in all sorts of situations. I mess up, I say I'm going to do it, I don't do it. I do bad things, I do good things, and he's there to support me unconditionally. And he figures things out for me in ways that I didn't think he would show up for me in those ways. How could I accept and trust that this being loves me enough and cares about me enough that things will be figured out? He has enough power. So to me, that's what the journey's been, really stepping away, which part of the reason why it's been successful is because then I'm not living with that shame and then recognizing that my life got better, and then ultimately starting to come back to more practices, but from a place of where my practices and my actions don't define who I am. That's really what it is. Whether I do it or not, my identity, my value, my worth is not tied to what I do. It's tied to who I am, and who I am will never be taken from me.
Wow. So, yeah, what is your identity? Who are you? And yeah, how do you make sense of this thing called life, existence, consciousness, or whatever it is?
So one of the ways I make sense of life is, and I came upon this a couple months ago, is I no longer make goals in the sense of like my for this year what I'm going to do. This is my goal because if I set a goal, of course I have goals in business, but when I mean that they're like personal development goals, I don't set goals anymore. I rather set attitudes because when I set a goal and I say to them, okay, I'm going to read 10 pages a day for 90 days. So that means that if I don't read 10 pages, if I don't read 10 pages a day, then I'm like, I failed my goal. I'm a failure. Let's say I do, which very possibly I could. Until I got to those 90 days, I wasn't a success. I just was working towards being a success. And that's a very painful way to live. So either I get there and then when I get there, I have to do something else. So to me, it's how do I accept? And I guess in a way it's easier if I believe in God, because I believe that I have a purpose, that I have a journey. There's something for me to do here. And I know what it is. So it makes it a lot easier. But I truly accept that no matter what I do or what I don't do, because I'm living, because I'm alive, because I have breath, I have value. I have that innocent, childlike, playful part of me has never been lost, and it's always there. The part of me that never worried, that never had a care in the world, that was just innocent, that part of me is always there. And I'm really not defined by my actions because one day I do this, that means I'm awesome. The next day I do this means I'm bad. What I really want to look at for myself is where's my desire at? What's my what's my desire? Because ultimately I'm not going to be perfect. And that's the other piece is when I stopped, if my expectation was perfection, I'm never going to get there. And if I'm never going to get there, I'm never going to be happy because that's my expectation of when I'm going to be okay with myself. So really realizing the journey is the destination. And when I do things or don't do things, I'm doing the best I could, literally. Just because I say something not nice to somebody in that moment, based on my trauma, based on my history, based on how much sleep I got and how much coffee I had, that was the best I was able to show up in that moment. Now, of course, I'm
Yeah,
responsible to apologize, but I'm doing the best I can.
beautiful. I love that you yeah reframed goals. It reminds me a lot of this habit science thing where not being attached so much to the black and white goal, but rather putting the focus on the systems and the processes in order to make it happen. And one of those is that shift to attitudes and intentionality. And yeah, rather than having goals, shifting into a different identity of the person who then achieves the goals, but is able to not beat themselves up for whether they, achieve it or not. I love that.
Do I hear Atomic Habits? James
Yeah,
Clear?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There was something else in my head that I was thinking about as well that was guiding me to the next question. Um, dang. Yeah, okay. Let's go with this. I'm curious to get your perspective on um how do people make sense of labels with respect to identity? Like how can we, I mean, they have a use. They can be super insightful, but they can also be super limiting. So yeah, I'd love your perspective. Maybe imagine if you were talking to the previous version of you from 10, 15 years ago or whenever, uh, in this journey.
Right. So I don't want to dismiss labels because to me labels are all about what do I do about it? Like I have this label, I have that label. And the unfortunate reality is I believe we had this conversation when we spoke back then. We call them sticky labels. So I got diagnosed in my 20s with bipolar, and that's it. That's who I am for the next 60 years. No provider has the capacity or interest in saying maybe that's not true. Let's take a risk. Let's try because it's easier for them just to continue writing the prescription for lithium than it is to have a client go off medication. There's liability. What happens if he gets manic? And to me, the biggest freedom I felt in my life was when my psychiatrist, I went to a new guy and he turned to me and he said, Morty, I don't believe you have bipolar. And he said, I'm willing to prove it to you. I said, how are you going to prove it to me? He said, the easy thing for me to do is continue giving you medication. Come in, 20 minutes, here's your medication, and that's it. And you'll be done. Because I don't believe you have it, I'm going to take that journey with you and help you get off that medication. So,
Wow.
yeah, isn't that fascinating? I never thought I would
Yeah,
meet
yeah.
anybody like that.
It's incredible to find those kind of practitioners. Yeah, I've had to search online to just have a simple 20-minute conversation with psychiatrists to give me the belief that that's possible. Uh, yeah, that I actually had some authority in my own journey because we place so much authority on our history, our labels, and and once it's there, it's kind of like a stamp. It's so hard to undo. But yeah, do continue.
And it's really on me, on us, to not over identify with my label. And I think the reason why I did was because I felt so much freedom in it. Like, oh, this explains who I am. But just because that explains who you are, that doesn't mean that is who you are. So that's really the balance. Okay, I was given a diagnosis of OCD. Now everything makes sense to me. So I'm Morty, and I'm OCD. It's right. That just explains why you process the way you process, and that's the way you think. That doesn't mean that's who you are. Doesn't mean that your outlook on the world, because
Yeah.
that's the other piece. So then everything becomes about OCD. There's nothing of like, maybe I'm just feeling anxious today. Maybe I'm just feeling tired. Everything's from that lens and it really colors everything. And usually it's so nuanced. I may have OCD in these areas, and in these areas, I may not. And part of the label is then we limit ourselves. So, for an example, if I tell myself I am this person or I have this, and I tell myself that all the time, and I tell my friends, and I'm constantly talking about it, then I'm going to act more like a person that has that, as opposed to, all right, this is what I
Yeah.
have. What could I do about it?
Yeah, it's that self-reinforcing belief loop and the placebo effect versus the nocebo effect. Our beliefs have so much impact on who we are and the version of ourselves that we create. And there was also something else that popped into my consciousness as you were sharing that. The label, as much as it explains who you are, it doesn't explain everything about who you are, because one label is one label, but maybe you have five, and you can't really separate environment's impact. As you said, maybe it's my mood, my sleep, my anxiety, my relationships, whatever it may be. And on top of that, it's just a snapshot. It's a picture in time, and it doesn't mean that it has to be fixed. Just like growing up as a kid, when you take a picture as a kid, it's not going to be the same picture as an adult. And I think we can do the same thing with our brains. We can learn, we can heal, we can change our habits, we can change our environment, our situation, and that has a massive impact on our labels. Our Yeah.
And for most people, what I find ultimately what they're looking for, they're not able to get it a lot of the time is because only recently has it become more common. What they really need is nervous system regulation. What they really
Yeah.
need is to find how to be okay with their bodies.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a big thing for this 21st century. I love it. Morty, um, what's something that you haven't mentioned yet in this conversation that you'd love to share with the audience? Or if there's maybe something that you want to re-emphasize?
One of the most important questions I ask my clients, and the challenge with the questions I ask my clients is sometimes they're too simple. So, or they seem funny, so they don't take me seriously. And this has the capacity to change somebody's life. I say to them, what are you doing for fun? They say, who cares about that? Because really,
Wow.
that's a good question, no?
Yeah. Yeah, it's great.
Because the deeper meaning of that question really is, right? On the surface, it sounds funny, but really what I'm asking them is, what do you do to take care of you? We are so busy for good reason. We have responsibilities. We have to show up in our lives for others. We're so busy taking care of everybody else. And if you're struggling, probably one of the issues is you're not taking care of yourself. And to me, that's such an important place to start. Forget about therapy, forget about modalities, forget about labels. Even if you have no labels, what are you doing to take care of yourself? They call it self-care. Unfortunately, self-care got like a bad rap. So that's why I call it, what are you doing to have fun? And most people turn to me and say, I don't do anything to have fun. I say, so when do you enjoy life? Like, well, I'm actually not enjoying life. So
Yeah.
before we start trying to enjoy the things that we need to do, which is absolutely possible, a lot of, living in the present, being mindful, being more playful, that's possible. But the easiest place I find to start is taking time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. Do something with yourself to really learn that I could be with myself. I could care for myself. I don't need necessarily always rely on my partner or other people to regulate me. That's a heavy burden. What could I do to nurture myself? And it's a really amazing and beautiful practice of having fun with myself. That sounds funny, but that's really what it is.
Amazing. I love it. And yeah, it's so simple, but it's such an important question. It really is. Yeah, amazing. Morty, thank you so much for everything that you've shared so far. I would love to keep talking for another hour, but we'll wind down the conversation. Obviously, your biography and any relevant links will be in the show notes below. If anybody would like to get in touch with you or just learn a bit more about what you do, what would be the next step?
They could go on my website, which is thegamechangergroup.com. Thegamechangergroup.com. Schedule a free call with me. There's no charge. I'll just be happy to chat. And the reality is, this is about helping people and supporting people, getting what you need. So just reach out and schedule a time, and let's see. If I don't have the answer, I may know somebody that might have the answer, and that could keep you down the road of recovery to really get you what you need for healing.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, clearly, based on the conversation we've had, based on the transformational journey that you've been through, and the knowledge and experience you have, yeah, I would highly recommend it. Maybe I'll have one myself.
Yeah,
Anyway,
no,
thank you. Thank you so much, Morty, for sharing your words of wisdom, this inspiring story of yours, and some really insightful, practical tools for hope and healing. Thanks again for being such a great guest.
thank you. Just so much fun to be with you.